Hello everyone and welcome to another News Coolum video. I don't have a whole lot of time. I'm getting out late, but I did want to get this in before the Coast to Coast EVs live stream this week, hopefully, just because we're going to be talking about charging hardware. And what I want to check out on this trip is I guess they're just calling it Gen 4 BTC power. But the broader scope of this trip is I just want to ask the question, right, of whether Love's is sort of a viable travel option right now in terms of a travel corridor. I don't want to go into all of the details right now, but we're going to be driving today partially what I'm calling the central loop. And again, I'll get into that in more detail, but between Sacramento and Los Angeles, there's an interstate and a highway corridor that create about a 600-mile loop. And this is a route that I've been driving since 2017 in my Bolt EV. This central loop basically connects in the interior of the state of California, and it's about a little less than 400 miles from Los Angeles to Sacramento using either Interstate 5 or Highway 99, both very valid travel corridors. So we're going to check out the Love's travel plazas along Highway 99, because a lot of EV drivers now are starting to gravitate toward travel plazas for, their long distance trip needs. 24/7 bathrooms, trash cans, squeegees, usually food, amenities, places for pets, things like that. Travel plazas just in general kind of align very well with the typical 15 to 30 minute stops that you're going to be making in an electric vehicle every 100 to 200 miles, at least right now with the current crop of electric vehicles. So I'm going to go ahead and check it out and just see if Love's is, like I said, at this point, a valid travel corridor. These sites they did build early on, to Love's credit, but they were using some of the older BTC power hardware, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in Coast to Coast EVs, wasn't the most reliable, and they were super expensive. I seem to recall even as high as like 95 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that, something ridiculous at a point in time when I was spending 10 to 15 cents per kilowatt hour using EVgo. So for me, it was just not even a reason to use them. And then again, with this central loop, I'll go into it in more detail later, but just my assessment of it is, if you want to be a national charging provider that's taken seriously, if you aren't at least covering this loop in some capacity, I don't know that you can be taken seriously, right? Because California is the number 3 state in the United States in terms of geographical area. It's the number 1 state in terms of population, and it's the number 1 state in terms of vehicle passenger miles traveled per year. So out of the 5+ trillion miles that Americans drive per year, well over 80 billion of those miles are driven in California alone, right? So, and then of course, the elephant in the room is California is the number 1 state in the United States in terms of EV adoption, rivaling some of the markets with the most EV adoption in the world, right? So to say that any charging provider who wants to be taken seriously needs to be covering the central loop, I think, is an understatement. And then I'll be using that central loop also as the framework for those, what I'm calling a charging provider showcase, right? A CPO, or charge point operator showcase, a CPO showcase. So anyway, I was really hoping to get out of here by 11 a.m. This was the latest point, and I think I might actually be a little bit late. I need to pick up my co-host Kid Harrington in his hairy body. I'm not really going to be leaving the car. It's going to be super hot, so just having him in here will be nice. But like I said, I wanted to charge up enough to be able to make it to the first Love's stop, which might be hit or miss. Luckily, we do have a north wind. It should help the efficiency just a little bit. but it doesn't really help as much as you might hope. And I was hoping to add about 30 kilowatt hours into the battery on solar yesterday, but we had a freak, you know, rainstorm and cloudy skies all day yesterday. So I came up a little bit short. So hopefully we don't have to top up along the way. But again, at this point, I'm just kind of buying time to see how much more energy I can put into the battery before we leave. Yeah, I just need to wrap a few more things up. I think put a little bit of air in the front tire, and we will get ready to head out. Let's hit the road. I decided to go ahead and just stop here in Williams on my way. I was just looking at the efficiency and the miles left, so I figured I would just go ahead and stop here really quick and top up. Electric Era did update their interface, it looks like, a little bit. It's slightly different, still super easy. You can pay first, or it looks like they might have even changed it around so you could plug in first and then pay, just the order of operations that they showed on the screen afterward. It is a little bit slower of a handshake though. So this new software interface does take a little bit longer. Looked like it took about 40 seconds, but that might have been from the time that I actually submitted my payment. So it might still be the same, 20-second or so handshake once the vehicle is plugged in. So maybe not that big of a deal. And then just looking at the timer, it was about 1 full minute before it was dispensing the full power that my car was asking for. It peaks up to a little over 40 kilowatt, even though we're this high in the battery, and then it will taper down almost immediately. So we're only charging it at 34 kilowatt right now, which I don't expect much more than that in the Bolt EV after 60% battery. But like I said, we still have well over 100 miles left to go, so I would prefer to probably leave here with about 70% battery, which was what my initial plan was. But like I said, I wasn't able to add enough at home. So we'll be here for a couple of minutes and then head out, and then I can actually turn the car on and still run the air conditioner, and it's not going to really impact the charging speed at all. So we'll be here for a few minutes. I might take a little bit extra B-roll. Like I said, new interface for Electric Era, but same reliable charger. I have no complaints with them. I think they might be, well, they had the one credit card reader one time in Mount Shasta that didn't work, and I moved to another charger and was able to charge. But other than that, they're 100% for me. So it's like them and Pilot Flying J are the only two charging providers I've used that have ever been like 100% over multiple sessions. So anyway, yeah, we'll make it quick, and then we'll get ready to head out. right, well, welcome to Love's. I actually just activated the charger and ran in really quick. I had to use the bathroom. I was looking for a rest area along the way, and I thought there was one, but I didn't see one after, north of Sacramento. And so between the traffic and how long it took to get here, I had to use the bathroom really bad. So I just went ahead and activated the charger, ran in and used the bathroom. I did actually also get my ChargePoint card out because this is under the ChargePoint network, but it looks like the RFID reader isn't working on these, or they don't have it set up, and I just ended up probably you can activate through the app. I'm not going to do that. Like that kind of negates the whole purpose. So I just went ahead and plugged in and paid with card. This is the 4th gen BTC Power hardware. So let's take a look at it. This is the Gen 4 hardware. They very proudly announced BTC Power on it. And you'll notice here, this is with my AC running. We're only pulling 36 kilowatt from the charger. That is not a Bolt EV issue, and this is one of those things that I try to tell people about when they say, oh, what point is it, testing out the charging infrastructure with a 10-year-old EV. But the thing is, the Bolt EV can still pull a lot more than what this is offering. And what this is telling me is right now it's capped to around 100 amp. Now that is not obviously normal for this charger. I think they have it rated as a 360 kilowatt charger, but it is supposed to be able to output up to 500 amps. So what this is telling me is there's something here with this charger where it is software restricted, or maybe hardware restricted with a thermistor or something, to a 100 amp limit. And I apologize if there's some wind noise because my dead cat microphone cover got broken. So anyway, so here we are. Otherwise this is nice hardware. Like I said, it does seem like the RFID card reader is not active. The pager did work. Just some overall thoughts on the hardware too. You'll notice that the CCS1 is on the left side, and they do have NACS, but the NACS is on the right side. And this is what I think people were complaining about from Tesla, saying they would much rather have like what we saw from Electric Arrow, where the NACS is on this side, so that they can back in the way they're used to backing in with the Tesla superchargers. And likewise, my car nose in would prefer that the CCS1 be on this right side. So that's something maybe Love's needs to consider with their BTC Power deployment. I guess I could even jump over to this other charger to see if it is also restricted, but this is the same configuration. So the NACS plug, and they say available power output is 360. So yeah, it has the NACS plug on this side, CCS on that one. Overall though, it is a Love's, so it does have that travel center amenities. That's why I was able to run right in and use the bathroom. We have the squeegees here, and then again, like I said, the hardware. One of the other things too I was gonna note is this does have a green indicator to show that it's on, but there's nothing to indicate that it is in use. So that's one of the distinctions that I think BTC Power needs to do with this hardware. A lot of the newer hardware now will not just tell you that it's on, right, but it's also going to provide the actual status of the hardware. And this is the other thing too. Looks like the cabinet, the fans are running even just with my car. And this is, I think my understanding is that this cabinet has a total max output of 360. So it's not that each one of these chargers is a 360 kilowatt charger. It's that they're sharing a 360 kilowatt cabinet is my understanding of how this works. So essentially this site is the equivalent of a 4-stall V3 supercharger, if you want to look at it that way. A single 360 kilowatt cabinet and then 4 output stalls. Now obviously there are some other differences. These are max limited to 500 amps. Overall, like, this is a serviceable site. Like I said, I'm a little bit concerned that it is only providing 100 amps, and with this old Bolt EV, what that means just in a real world heuristic is that it will only add 1% per minute of charging. So I'll need to put in the map where the next Love's Travel Plaza site is, but that could require us to be here for a while. Like I said, it's not terrible. I mean, there's a lot to do here, but you know, if I were traveling, this first stop would be a bathroom stop only, right? I wouldn't really have a need. I'm not hungry, I don't need food. I could walk the dog, but that's really about it. So right now, this only being 100 amps is a little bit concerning. It's a newer site, so hopefully this isn't an issue with the hardware itself. It's just maybe new site jitters, or they're still waiting for it to be fully powered up, though the site has been online for a while now. I actually think I am going to move over to this other charger just to see if it's also capped at 100 amps. Well, so this is fluctuating up, but I actually think that might be my car drawing from the air conditioning. So we've been here for, I believe, 16 minutes now. This doesn't really give any real information. So where would the RFID card? On the panel below. See, I think that's what this is. I'll have to see with the other one. Yeah, I think I want to stop and see what happens on the other charger. So we're at 34%, and then I guess that's confirm. All right, let's move over to number 2. Hopefully the wind noise isn't too bad. I'm gonna try my RFID card first again, and then this way, well, let's see. Yeah, I'm not getting anything reading on this, so I'm just gonna go ahead and put my card in again. Card accepted, all right. And then this also gives me the opportunity to see how the cable retention works when I'm doing it the way it's supposed to be done. And ironically, I think this actually might put more stress on the cable. The retention does work, but this is also, I think, like the complaint that Tesla owners had about when the cable is on that side. With these type of cable retentions, they're different than the armatures on the Alpatronic HYC 400. And this really would, I think, impede the driver's side door. So yeah, I'm gonna see how much stress this is gonna put on my cable port. It should be okay if I don't let it off. Much, much better. All right, so it is the other charger. I'm glad I switched. The other charger is limited to 100 amps for whatever reason. So charging here, it will literally save me, like it'll reduce the time by about half. So whether it's the unit or the cable specifically, I'm not sure, but something on unit number 1 is limited to 100 amps. This one is not. But again, it would be nice with this BTC Power interface if it actually showed what's happening with the charge rather than just the basic information. So just moving over to this charger number 2. basically confirmed that it was, yes, the first charger was power limited. So it's not a site power limitation, and it's not an incompatibility issue, right? So we know that those restrictions are just something to do with charger number one, so hopefully they can get that straightened out. In terms of the BTC Power hardware, though, the the jury's still out. There are some things I like about this hardware, and just in terms of appearance, it looks like it's a power distribution site rather than like a dedicated power site. For travel plazas, I think I would prefer the dedicated power model rather than the sort of distributed power model that we see from like Tesla and Kempower. Maybe even what Alpitronic is trying to do with their HYC 1000. I'm not a huge fan of that power distribution model at locations that are primarily going to be supporting travelers, right? I want nameplate power to be provided to all charging stalls. For me, the big question with BTC Power at this point, and I'd be curious to find out, bringing up Electrify America again, Electrify America kept Signet and kept BTC Power as their two hardware providers, and they went with their 4th gen hardware for Electrify America. And I'm guessing that they had some sort of inner workings between like BTC Power and Electrify America and Signet to set up the hardware the way they wanted it. So I don't quite know what the difference is between this sort of, I guess, call it generic BTC Power Gen 4 hardware and Electrify America's 4th gen BTC Power hardware. I mean, obviously there's some cosmetic differences, right? Electrify America only has one plug. They don't distribute power in quite the same way. And then of course, for me with BTC Power, the elephant in the room is how long are those displays going to last? Now, this has been a criticism that I've had of BTC Power for a long time, is it just seems like their screens always die. This has been true basically for the 10 years that I've been driving in, an all-electric vehicle and relying on BTC Power that's units that have been deployed. And in some cases, it's not a huge deal, right? Like in Las Vegas, when I visited years and years and years ago, most of the terrible herps had an EVgo BTC Power L3R unit. And a lot of times the screens were down. The screens were, you couldn't interact with them in any way. But EVgo had them set up so that you could activate using the physical buttons on the unit. And that's the only reason some of those were usable. But the screens would go out regularly. And then, of course, I've just seen there's like what I call the BTC burn, right? It's just the cigarette burns that you constantly see them on all of these BTC Power chargers, and their screens just don't last very long. And then like Caltrans, they have their BTC Power L3Rs, but because of the way they've set some of them up, you can't actually start them without the screen, right? Without the interface on the screen. And at that point, a down screen means the hardware is down. It's just unusable. So we'll have to see how this works out. I know there's also an alternative, right? When Recargo, the one site that Recargo was actually able to build, they built with BTC Power hardware, but they bought upgraded screens, and I don't think that I've seen those screens used by anyone anywhere. They just weren't installed for long enough to know what their reliability was over time, because like I said, that was the only Recargo charging site that had ever been brought online, and it was purchased by EVgo, and then they later replaced those BTC Power units with just standard BTC Power units. And within a few weeks, those screens started having issues too. So we'll have to see. Hopefully BTC Power has improved their screen quality, especially in a location like this, and especially for charging hardware that doesn't have a canopy. Maybe it's better when there's a canopy, maybe it's better in more temperate climates, but when you regularly have 100-degree summers and the chargers are out in the sun all day long, I could see some issues. Getting past the hardware, and in terms of Love's specifically, this is sort of the northernmost Love's Travel Plaza charging site in California. And I just put in the map for the next Love's site that we're going to go to. And it's actually only 81 miles down, the Madera site. And like I said, I was aware of all of these for a while, but I never used them because they were so expensive compared to everything else at the time. But these have been in for a very long time. So this is really also my checking just their implementation and their update, right? Overall, maybe I'm not going to make a full assessment just yet, but if this is the upgrade that they're making, I think it is noteworthy. So I'm still sort of posing the question to myself, is this a viable travel network right now? Like I said, sharing 360 kilowatts across 4 charging stalls is a little bit suspect for me. Only having 4 active charging stalls at a location is also a little bit suspect. But this exit, this jack tone exit here in Ripon, there's soon to be a Pilot Flying J charging site, and there's soon to be an Iona. And with that, I think maybe 4 stalls is fine. If you get here and it's full, there's going to be a Pilot or an Iona, or if you go to a Pilot or an Iona and they're down or they're full or whatever, this will serve as a backup. But so I think in that regard, it's fine, but you can't always, as a charging provider, rely on other charging infrastructure to be nearby. So only having 360 kilowatts available total power at this site and having it distributed over 4 stalls would have been good, would have been great 6 years ago, right? 8 years ago, but now it's a little bit insufficient. And then of course, we have the Loves here with the gas, but that's actually not even that bad of a gas price in California right now. A little over $5 a gallon. So yeah, let me see here, so here's the problem I see with this. This is not in compliance with California law right now. So this is something that I think Loves, they need to be aware of this. They need to look at this, because somewhere on this screen, there needs to be information regarding the pricing. None of this is giving that pricing. So yeah, this is technically out of compliance with I knew, I didn't see it, but I should have called this out. There should have been some indication somewhere before you pay how much you're paying per kilowatt hour, and that is nowhere on here. So we're going to go ahead and stop. Even here, nothing, it doesn't tell. So the only way this is acceptable is if it's free. But if it's free, then you wouldn't need a credit card reader. So I think Loves needs to look into that. And in fact, the only reason these might have been allowed to be powered on is because it was a pre-existing site. But because it is new hardware, there needs to be some indication on here. And then I guess we could check the total time I was here, but I think it's been a little over 30 minutes, right? So, but yeah, no information. Yeah, no information. So, and it's not even like it's up there. Oh well, let's go. welcome to Madera. I also noticed a 7 charge across the street, so we might have to check that out. But I had to back into this parking space. Authorization successful. Now, while I don't like this configuration as much, it actually puts a lot less stress on the cable. Go ahead and try this one again. And notice this, instead of 360, actually listed as 350. Go ahead and plug in first. And I think I'm gonna try to tap to pay maybe this time. Card accepted. So now, yeah, now it's preparing. So I think it was just maybe something with the payment terminal on the other one. Not the best handshake time. But again, the other thing too, no information on the pricing. And that's, again, that's a California requirement. Maybe they got away with it just because this is a renovation of an existing site, but I'm pretty sure they have to be in compliance with that requirement by now anyway. And I'm pretty sure that exemption does not apply to updated hardware. So again, just overall, like the bare necessities of what you'd expect from a travel plaza: trash cans, squeegees. Unfortunately, no covering for this one either. This unit, I think, also lists 350 kilowatts. So the other one listed 360, a slightly different configuration, I guess, but more or less the same hardware, it looks like. So this is that Gen 4 BTC power, and located at a Love's. There's an Arby's. There's a dog park over there. I'm not going to take the little guy over there yet. He is hankering for his dinner. And then of course we've got the drive-through right here, the Arby's over there, and into the actual convenience store in there, the bathrooms. And then again, this is just, with this type of cable management, this configuration, they really should consider switching the sides of the NACS and the CCS. This one should be a little bit less of an issue for Tesla owners because they can technically nose in, which means the driver's side door will not be impeded. So this is really, actually, if anything, it's more of an inconvenience for standard sort of configuration CCS1 EVs, where the driver's side front is where the CCS plug is, and then that just requires us to back in, right? So you're asking us to do what Tesla owners prefer to do, and you're asking Tesla owners to do what we prefer to do. So and honestly, even if you did 50-50 and just switched back and forth, but the other site too, or the other charger I'd pulled in initially, and I was just going to pull it across and use it, but I decided not to because this was the ADA designated with the special access ramp. So, but again, the other thing is too to note, CCS1 and NACS, if someone in an ADA vehicle that's CCS1 wanted to come in and use this, then they would end up needing to use an adapter in order to get the NACS, because these BTC Power Gen 4 hardware do not have built-in adapters like an Omniport, Magic Dock, or anything else like that. So again, one more nitpick about the hardware, but it is a feature that it is lacking. All right, so in the most important news, Kid Furrington got his food. He has eaten, and that is the most important thing. Also, this unit is charging at 52 kilowatts. So I wouldn't be surprised if the other unit works with the ChargePoint app. Again, like I said, it's kind of sad that they're doing the ChargePoint backend, but they're not supporting the ChargePoint RFID. But then also, in terms of the overall network now, as we're looking at it, right? So far, 2 stops, I was able to get the chargers at the first stop both up and running immediately the first attempt, but one of them was restricted in power. Here, The first unit I didn't. So in both cases, 2 for 2 now, I've had to move my car in order to get the optimal charging session, or even just start it to begin with. In both cases, the charge connector is not located on the ideal side of the charger. And again, I make a distinction for these Gen 4 BTC power units because unlike the ABB A400s or the Alpitronic HYC 400s, those have larger armatures, greater reach with their cable retention. This is just the basic cable pulley system, which would become an issue. This is a little less so because unlike the first site, this is a pull-in stall as opposed to the charger dispenser being at the end of the charging stall. And so for Tesla owners, it probably doesn't matter at all. But I had to back in, and this parking lot is not really designed for cars to back into a parking space. I say as I look across me, and every single car is technically backed in, but I'm pretty sure they just pulled through the parking stall. Either way, the other big thing is I loaded the next charging stop up onto the map, and the next Love's charging stop on this route is only 73 miles away. So this gap is even shorter than the other gap. It really is almost ideal for a 300-mile EV where you're probably only going to be using half to maybe a third of the stops along the way. But as it is, like we almost already added enough range to make it to the next stop. I'm going to need to use the bathroom. He's going to want to use the bathroom. So we're probably going to overcharge and then get out of here with excess battery capacity. Also, it's very nice that they had trash cans because his food exploded on my hands and I had a place to throw them away without making too much of a mess. The other thing is they still aren't showing pricing on the displays here, which is a big problem. Like I said, that's actually a California regulation compliance problem. So Love's needs to nip that in the bud pretty quick. Well, it says the card is accepted. Authorization successful. This is taking a little bit longer than normal to activate. This is already a little bit frayed. Just has not withstood the test of time. All right, well, they're saying there was an error. So this one looks like it's timing out as well. I don't know how much longer I'm going to let it time out for. But this is also one of the things when, you know, you see someone using another charger, right? Then you have to wonder, did they have to try this charger too? Okay, reset a payment. All right, so with that out of the way, with the tape out of the way, it actually accepted the card. So this is kind of stupid. Loves, you don't need that on there. I don't know why you're blocking the RFID card. It worked. Or at least it seems to have worked. Started right up. So kind of why the RFID is my preferred payment method. And then this one isn't restricted either. So yeah, it's kind of why the RFID is my preferred payment method. If you're anywhere where maybe cell coverage isn't great or whatnot, RFID card will almost always work, and it's just kind of hardwired to your account. So yeah, I think if I were Loves, right, and a charge point, even with this BTC Power hardware, I would encourage people to use the RFID card if they want to. It's just a so much more convenient and easy way of doing it. So, but otherwise, yeah, this is that same standard site. It just kind of looks universal. I don't know that this would comply with the Nevi requirements, right? I think this is about half the necessary power to comply with Nevi. Loves did go with Electric Era for their Nevi site in Colorado. I would recommend that they continue going with Electric Era, especially, you know, that it's not necessarily that the SK Signet units that Electric Era uses are better, but I think they are better than the Gen 4 BTC Power units, and their back end, I feel like it's just, I haven't had any issues, right? It's just far fewer issues with Electric Era. So overall, this is a nice Love site. It's got a Subways and a McDonald's. Yeah, so it's got a Subway and McDonald's. So, you know, depending on the types of food that you like to eat, obviously you could walk across the street and also use the Wendy's at the Flying J, or just, you know, from either the convenience stores or whatever. A dog park here, plenty of space. There's some nice evening shade, which I think is going to be helpful for this location. So yeah, all's well that gets to the midpoint well, I guess. Not even close to being over. Nothing is over. I don't like the fact that I've had to do multiple activation attempts, right? Again, they're covering the RFID with tape for some reason, but it's clear that it works, right? So I don't know who at Loves needs to hear that, but they should just remove that RFID card cover, because the charge point card works. Mine works just fine. The other one is working from what I can see. There's a Bolt EV parked there plugged in, appears to be charging. And this one, again, it seems like it's the payment reader. And again, this could also just be the integration between BTC Power, ChargePoint, just how Loves has chosen to do it. Overall, I'm not super impressed, but then, like I said, also for this location, I think southbound, if you have a 300-mile EV that can charge at 150 kilowatt or faster, I think this is a perfectly serviceable site as a southbound travel corridor. If you're heading north, then again, this site is going to be pretty easy to get to in a 300-mile EV, and you might even be able to stretch it all the way to Madera on a single charge. Bad weather conditions, though, you would want a charger here. And then also, there's another Loves that's just north of Bakersfield, and I think for southbound traffic to be really confident, like in a Bolt EV, we could charge up here, but unless you're charging up to 90% or more, which you're just not going to do on a fast highway trip, I wouldn't feel confident heading back into LA. I would feel like I would need another charge. And so to support that southbound route, I would say Love's really needs to get a charger installed at their location that's just north of Bakersfield, and that would be very, very helpful. Now, in terms of I-5, so far Love's still doesn't have any coverage on it, and there's a site that's slated for Santanella. That's going to be super important, both connecting, like I said, Madera and Salinas, and then over into the Bay Area, but also Santanella is just a key location on I-5. I believe they also have a Lost Hills location on I-5, and then of course going north, they have a location in Williams, which would also be super important. So, and again, Williams to Santanella, that's a gap that's really more for those 300-mile class of EVs. And then, of course, Santanella to Lost Hills. So modern EVs don't need as much infrastructure to support them. So these sites along Highway 99 are pretty packed together by modern EV standards. They'd be great for a Bolt EV or 2014 to 2018 era EVs. Newer EVs don't need this much support, but they do need something that Love's isn't doing, which is more power. My suggestion for Love's is, if they want to keep using this hardware, if they're saying this is the kind of hardware that they want to use, my suggestion would be to dedicate a cabinet to each dispenser. So that way, instead of splitting 350, 360 kilowatts across 4 stalls, you're only splitting 350, 360 kilowatts across 2 stalls. And then I would recommend possibly expanding the sites. So if Love's were to do 1 cabinet per dispenser, I think they could get away with just 2 dispensers per site on some of their locations. But much like I recommended for Pilot Flying J, especially on busy freeways like Interstate 5, I would recommend at least 6 to 8 stalls moving forward. That would create a sort of competitive environment for Love's, and that way, if they want to stick with this hardware, if they want to work with someone like Electric Era like they did in Colorado, they could have 8 stalls fed by 4 350 to 360 kilowatt cabinets. They're not going to run into any issues, right? They're going to have plenty of throughput, but I think 360 kilowatts of overall throughput for a travel plaza site just isn't enough, right? You want at least twice that, and then for busy highways, busy freeways, you probably want 3 to 4 times that, and then the corresponding number of stalls. Let's get ready to head out. Let's go. And actually, I probably don't even need to leave the car on anymore. it's warm, but there's no sun getting into the car. There is a twist to this cable that I don't like. Yeah, and this one is really well covered up. Like, by selecting RFID card though, it really seemed to... Yeah, so I don't know why. I just had to slide my card under here. This seems... So this charger did not work with the credit card reader. So, yeah, I don't know if this is intentional or not. And, you know, I guess I can assume that they don't want us using this, but I wonder if they erroneously covered this up because people were trying to use the credit card reader, or were trying to use this with their credit card instead of the credit card reader, and it was failing, and they're like, oh, well, we can fix this. We'll just cover the RFID card. But I'm sorry, like, I hope that's not what happened, because consumers should know. You should know this is credit card. You should know this is RFID. So it should be simple, the obligatory. Okay, so I went ahead and had the the G-Man add a stop to the next Ripon, the next Loves in Ripon. So we'll just basically repeat this trip back. Again, the spacing between these is 80 miles, so it's a little bit farther. We pulled in with a little over, I think it was 24%. We can do 80 miles pretty easily with 50%, but might as well just stick here as long as it's maxing out the 50 to 55 kilowatt charging rate of the Chevrolet Bolt EV. And again, I still don't know how much any of this is costing. So we'll probably be here for another 5 minutes or so, maybe 10 minutes tops, and that puts our estimated time of arrival in at the Ripon Loves at probably about 10:10 if we maintain that pace, the driving pace. And we're gonna get home pretty late. I think this whole trip is probably going to take 13 to 14 hours. So even though it's going to be pretty close to a 1,000-kilometer challenge, we've been doing a pretty lazy pace, I would say. 13 hours would be about what I would expect for not even really trying hard to do 1,000 kilometers in the Bolt EV. The other thing I was going to mention is even getting to the next Loves at 10 p.m. Here, the sun's going down, lights are out, and this is just another reason to value these travel plazas very highly. Is they're designed around travelers 24/7, so the whole facility is going to be well lit 24 hours a day, security, people on site, just a much safer environment, I would say, on average, than maybe even the average gas station, right? Travel plazas are going to be safer than the average gas station, and they're certainly going to be safer and at least feel safer than the average EV charging location, especially at nighttime. But again, let's get ready to head out. These chargers don't require my card to shut off, so unlike other charge point chargers, so we'll get ready to close out. So I think this is still got this in here as the map. So I'm gonna remove this. We're already here, obviously. So let's go ahead and, like I said, I don't actually need to keep it on this time. And I'm gonna try to pay with with the RFID card again. So I'm gonna plug in first, and it should ask me how I want to pay. Whoops. I'm gonna say RFID card, and it read through the tape. So this doesn't seem to be the same type of blocking tape, but yeah, it read this time. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure, like I said, why they're covering up the RFID card reader, but it's there and it's working if you need it. And then we should, yeah, we're down to 9%. Okay. And then this was the one that wasn't throttled, so we should be basically just stuck at 50 plus kilowatt for however long we're here. It's going to be, like, just to put it into perspective, compared to this one that's at 100 amps, this charger will shave somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes off of a charge from basically, say, 9% to 50%. It's pretty close to about, and really, yeah, up to maybe 55 or 60%. You don't taper down to 100 amp until after like 60 to 65% in the Bolt EV. So yeah, it saves easily 10 to 15 minutes on this charger. But we're probably only going to be here for about 30 minutes. So instead of 45 minutes, it'll be about a 30-minute charge session. Again, just kind of noting the lights. Everything is well lit. You know, kind of feel safe and secure here. There are a lot of people around. This charging stop here in Ripon, this Loves in Ripon, turned into a dinner stop. I got the best looking chef salad I could off the shelf and loaded it with Caesar dressing because I do what I want and render unto Caesar and whatnot. And then in terms of the other little Caesar boy, he had his potty time as well. So yeah, this trip went a little bit longer, or this stop I should say went a little bit longer. We're already to the taper point, like 60, yeah, we're about 60% battery now, so we're already down to about 100 amps and not really need to stay too much longer. Yeah, I was gonna check another site that I know is under construction on I-5, but just putting it in, it added like 30 minutes to my trip, and we're already kind of running pretty late. It just looks like I-5 has a bunch of construction and traffic and things like that, which is another reason why I don't really mind Highway 99 from time to time. I think it can often be a faster route. And then the other thing I wanted to say too is, you know, so far majority of the charging on Loves has been great. The new BTC Power Gen 4 hardware has worked really well, with that one hiccup of a reduced power, which could just be like a thermistor in the cable, right? It could be that simple. But I did want to close in my commentary about the BTC Power with just the statement that, you know, I've never had issues with BTC Power early on, right? It's never like, oh, they install it and the equipment is just crap from day one. My issue with BTC Power is its sort of resiliency, robustness, its lifespan. This equipment, in my experience, degrades and falls apart faster than most other equipment. So with BTC Power, maybe if you just keep up with the maintenance and, you know, like baby it a little bit, maybe it just lasts longer. But anyway, we've definitely stayed too long now, so let's get ready to hit the road. a little underhanded grab. Payment has been authorized, so auto charge is working as normal. Like I said, I think we're probably 14, 15%, 13% battery, so not too far off. And then at least here, it's expensive, but tells you what you're doing. And we jumped, yeah, almost immediately to 150 amps, 50 kilowatts. So everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. Yeah, and like I said, you know, on paper, if you look at nameplate power, this site is technically the same power level as the Love's site. The difference is, though, instead of one 350 kilowatt cabinet, there are two, right? So this site is actually double the power, double the throughput of that Love's site. So I think that is important for these travel plazas when they're considering it. And then they still haven't got the lights working here, which is unfortunate. That was kind of something I was hoping that they would get going, but so far they haven't. So anyway, like I said, I'm gonna maybe just rest my eyes a little bit before we make the final leg home. But we should probably, like I said, we probably only need to be here for maybe 25 minutes at most. All right, well, I think I over snoozed a little bit. So we've been here for 26 minutes now. And like I said, we only have like 60 miles or so to go home. We already have that with a minimum range. Even with the higher speed freeways and the elevation increase, we should have enough. So no reason to waste time. Let's just head home. Yeah, we were about 15 minutes faster than they thought. So I'll probably do a full wrap up tomorrow after I've got a little bit of rest. But yeah, and it ended up being about 14 hours and 20 minutes to do the whole trip, 631 miles. Like I said, a lot of lollygagging to not optimal, and then again arrived home with about 20% battery. So all's well that ends well. Got to get the little boy into the house, get the cats some more food, and close out in the morning maybe. I know this video is already going very long because I'm on the editing floor right now, but I really did want to turn these into a regular sort of CPO showcase to close out. With this, there's a few categories that I'm going to go over. I'm still sort of finalizing this at this point, but I came to the realization that not only am I not really great with the quantitative numbers, I'll leave that to some database analysts and people who love getting into the actual specific numbers. I prefer kind of the qualitative assessment aspect of these charging sites, and that's really what these trips are supposed to do, is stress test the network and see how it's operating in the real world on a real trip. And so with that, like I said, I'll defer to people like Walter over at the Network Architect channel, when he does his sort of quantitative analysis. Landon over at the Arkansas e-Traveler does something similar for the Walmart network. And in this case, for Loves, there is also someone, if you haven't heard, who's doing this work, which is Alan Yates. So I'm going to put links in the description to all of their channels. Some of this also has to do with Nevi, and I think Steve over at Plug and Play EV does a really great job with sort of the Nevi data, and we are seeing indications that the Nevi funding for California is rolling out, which is going to have a huge impact on Loves specifically in California, but just the overall network build out within California. So that being said, I just kind of wanted to close out with what I'll be going over for these CPO showcases, which, like I said, is sort of a pseudo quantitative, qualitative overview of the trip, how it went, and what went on. So for the overall trip total, and this is beyond just using Loves, right? Because I did need to rely on some other networks. But the total trip was 639.1 miles, which is actually, again, very close to the 621.4 miles. That's a 1,000-kilometer challenge. This was much more of a lazy sort of trip. And like I said, testing out and doing a deep dive into the Loves network. So our total trip time was 14 hours and 20 minutes. But 3 hours and 10 minutes of that was actually spent charging. So just to give you an idea, right, that's 11 hours and 10 minutes of non-charging time, which is essentially just driving time and whatnot. I think it works out to, well, less than 60 miles an hour of actual driving speed. So we weren't like just blazing any trails or anything like that. Now, the total cost for this trip is a little bit deceptive, though. Because I'm charging fully on solar from home, my base cost is zero, but the $79.50, that also includes the cost of the Pilot Flying J charging. And normally I would include that, but I also know that I have EVgo credits, so that entire session didn't actually cost me anything, but I'm putting it in the total anyway. Because if you didn't have those credits, this is how much the trip would have cost. And the cost per mile works out to 12.6 cents per mile. So not amazing, especially by EV standards, but pretty close to what you would expect in the most efficient gas car in California, given current gas prices. So even if you were rolling around in like a Toyota Prius or something like that, you'd be at least that expensive. So, and with the EVgo credits applied, the total cost was actually only $64.88, which works out to 10.3 cents per mile, which is, again, about as cheap as you can get for traveling these days energy-wise. Now, diving into the specifics of the Loves CPO showcase, I spent 2 hours and 29 minutes charging at Loves specifically. So I feel like this gave me a decent amount of time at the sites using the chargers. One of the side benefits of the Bolt EV taking as long as it takes to charge is you don't really feel rushed when you're looking at a site and sort of assessing and walking through it and testing everything. Now, my cost on the Loves network specifically was $61.44. And again, this is something that was missing from the Loves screen, is they didn't provide the upfront cost. So I actually had to dive into my receipts, both my credit card receipts and my ChargePoint app, to see what my charging history was, just to determine what the overall cost was. And so with that $61.44, we added a total of 128.84 kilowatt hours. So for you math nerds out there, you'll know that that actually ends up working out to 50 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, Even by the national average, actually, that's a little bit low. So it looks like Love's just sort of set it and forget it. I don't know what they did with the pricing. I just know that across the entire network that I used, it was all 50 cents per kilowatt hour. I didn't, again, without any pricing on the display, I couldn't see anything in terms of time of use or anything else. So there was no high or low cost. I have this in a category mostly as a placeholder, just to determine if you're traveling on a trip, what's the consistency in the cost. Because you might be paying on an average 50 cents per kilowatt hour, but maybe one station was 30 cents and another station was 60 or 70 cents, right? So I wanted to make sure I noted what the highest and lowest costs paid were, but it looks like across all three Love sites that we visited, it was a very consistent 50 cents per kilowatt hour. Kind of works out easy too because the electric arrow was also 50 cents per kilowatt hour. So that seems to be kind of a bit of a standard pricing model right now in California for some of these networks. And really, it's only time of use that will end up seeing prices that are significantly lower than that. Now, back to this sort of qualitative assessment of the Love's network. I visited a total of 3 sites. Now, I visited 2 of those sites twice, but for this, I really only want to list the unique locations. And so we visited Ripon twice, visited Madera twice, and we visited Tulare once. This actually gave me the opportunity to use 5 different chargers. So I was able to personally verify that each and every one of those chargers were available for use and work. With Tulare, the one exception was one of the other chargers was in use, and I saw it in use and I saw someone charging there. So basically, we can say with relative certainty that all of the chargers were up across all of the sites that we visited. So there were 0 chargers down. Some would say that's sort of a bare minimum expectation at this point, but honestly, like I said, even visiting gas stations, I would expect some percentage to be down some of the time, which again kind of leans into the idea that you want a few more than just 2 dispensers and 4 stalls at these sites. But you can't you can't argue with perfect, right? None of the chargers were down. But that being said, of the 5 chargers that I used, 2 of the point of sale card readers were down. So I'm not counting the multiple failures, right? Just one first time fail to access the charger or activate the charger would count. So we had a payment reader in Madera that was down, and we had a payment reader in Tulare that was down. So 2 of the payment readers I can confirm were down. Now, in both cases, the next time I tried to use them, I used my RFID card from the ChargePoint network, and the charger worked. So I know it's specifically a payment reader issue and not a charger issue. And so that's maybe something Loves needs to look into, how the Payter is integrated. For whatever reason, I'm not going to look into all of the potential excuses for why the 2 payment readers were down, just that they were, and basically that's not acceptable. So the hardware works, the charger works, but the payment reader didn't. So they need to fix that. And then in terms of the underperforming chargers, there was one charger that was underperforming in Ripon, only 100 amps. And so when you pull into a 350, 360 kilowatt nameplate power charger, and it's only able to output 100 amps. So maybe on an 800 volt vehicle, you might see 60 to 80 kilowatts. That's still not acceptable. So hopefully they can get that fixed. But yeah, one charger was clearly underperforming. And then one charger was clearly damaged in Tulare. And this is, when I say damaged, this could be any aspect of it. And this is specifically the cable retention on the CCS1 plug. The cord was already frayed and it was on its last leg. So that cable retention needs to be replaced. A couple other categories that didn't apply on this trip, but again, I want to put them in as placeholders so I know to assess this in the future. The first is queuing, right? I didn't have to wait to access a charger. And my preference at this point is, the infrastructure has been built out to the point where I don't really like to wait for chargers. I generally now show up at a site with enough buffer that if I need to go somewhere else, I have that option. And if I arrive at a charger and it's completely full, and especially if there are other cars waiting, I'll just leave. Now, that wasn't an issue here. These Love sites were recently renovated. They were very unreliable before, very low demand for these sites before. With this upgrade, maybe that will change. But for right now, nobody seems to really be prioritizing these chargers. And in the entire trip, I only saw one other car using a charger at one site. So accessing the chargers, no issue at all in terms of queuing or, basically too much demand for the site. And then inaccessible, there were zero. And again, this is not necessarily the same as queuing. I'm not going to count if multiple other EVs are plugged in and charging. This is specifically if a station is iced, if it's blocked, right? We've seen snow plows push snow in front of chargers before. We've seen delivery vehicles pull in front of chargers before and block them. So this is the inaccessible is more about the station being blocked and unable to access. It's not about it being in use, but luckily in this case, all of these chargers were open, accessible, and not really blocked in any way from being accessed. I want to just close with a kind of a overall network assessment based on this trip. And the first is that, yeah, this was kind of a contrived trip, but it gave me an opportunity to sort of stress test this Love's network, because this is a route that I do drive somewhat frequently. So knowing whether Love's is a viable network for me for this travel corridor is important. And like I said, for the community, and there's a ton of EV owners in California who do travel through the state regularly. So knowing whether this is a viable option for them is going to be important. In this trip, though, right, it was 639.1 miles, but that was sort of a round trip. I still needed another CPO in order to complete this trip. Now, I could make it to Ripon, especially on a full charge, but even with what I left with, I could make it to the first stop in Ripon without needing assistance. I didn't need to stop at the Electric Era. However, on the return, that's where things change, because in theory, I could charge to 100% in Ripon and be able to make it home again. However, you really don't. If a network's going to require you to charge to 80 or 90 or 100% just to make it to the next stop or to your next destination, I'm going to consider that needing assistance. Now, yes, it's true that if you're driving like a 300-mile EV, 300 miles of highway range EV with faster charging, that changes that dynamic. But for right now, outside of the time that it takes to add charge, even my 2017 Chevy Bolt EV is not that far behind the average EV that's being sold. So if you have an EV that's typically seeing 200 to 250 miles of range at freeway speeds, this trip you would have needed to probably use another CPO. And that's, again, this is on Love's because they have other locations along that route that had they installed chargers at them, no, another CPO wouldn't have been needed. Some of the other sort of qualitative aspects that I wanted to call out with Love's and with this stop, right? And the first is I'm going to be looking at how many canopy locations there are. So as I take a trip, and again, this is sort of a qualitative assessment of the network when traveling, is just what is my actual experience on the ground, right? Because any CPO can call out like these marquee flagship sites and say, look at how great this is. We have canopies, we have a big screen TV, we have a diner, right? Whatever you might want to say. But if that's not the regular in and out sort of day-to-day experience that an EV driver is going to see, well, that I'm showcasing what's actually out on the ground on real trips that people might take. So things like canopy locations. Unfortunately, none of the Loves that I visited had canopy locations. I know this is something that Loves is planning on, and if their Nevi sites going in on I-5 match that new model, they'll very likely be the more compelling chargers to use because they very well will have canopy locations. But I can't count what isn't there now. So the sites on Highway 99 do not have any sort of canopy or covering over the chargers. Also, in terms of pull-through stalls, not a single one of these locations had pull-through stalls. The site in Madera had pull-in stalls, but even then, that was already... The Bolt EV is not a very long car, and it was already kind of a pain to back into that charging stall. So trying to maneuver with the trailer or whatnot just wouldn't be possible, not without blocking multiple driving paths, multiple chargers. So no pull-through stalls at all for any of the sites that I visited. Now, the next one is oversubscribed, and I know I'll get some pushback on this, but like I said, I think this is something that I feel is very important, especially for travel plazas, or any sort of convenience store location where you're really looking to minimize the amount of time that you spend there, or have a very set like 15 to 20, maybe 30 minutes maximum that you spend there. And in this case, yes, the site is oversubscribed. It has a single 360 kilowatt cabinet for two 360 kilowatt dispensers. So, and with this, I'll be looking at both. Are is a nameplate power of the charger oversubscribed? And then I'll also be assessing the power drop itself. In this case, I should have checked the transformers. I believe they were right sized for a 360 kilowatt cabinet, but I'll be looking at this in more detail on future sites, just making sure that not only does the cabinet or power distribution match the nameplate power of the number of chargers and dispensers that are installed, but also does the power drop support it. And in this case, all of these sites were oversubscribed. The other thing is adapters. Now, yes, Loves did install the NAX plug in addition to the CCS1 plug, but in terms of each stall having basically a universal access point with built-in adapters, no, they don't offer that, and hopefully they will in the future. Loves has been partnering with ChargePoint. ChargePoint has their Omniport, and ChargePoint has been very good about ensuring that a single stall has access to multiple plug formats. So for now, this is 0, but again, Loves hopefully will be addressing that in the future in future sites. And then, yeah, just to close out, that gets back to this planned growth, right? And yes, there is planned growth for the Loves network right now. We know of at least 2 Nevi funded sites that are supposed to be going in along I-5 with Loves. They have multiple other sites that would be very valid, great locations for chargers. So hopefully Loves acts sooner rather than later on that, but at least for right now, we know of at least 2 more upcoming sites. And again, something that Walter has pointed out while tracking the alternative fuels data center database is that Love's has been opening one site a week, which doesn't sound like much, but if you only have 500 to 600 travel plazas and you're opening one a week, right? You're going to be adding, 10% of your sites are going to be adding chargers a year. That's not rapid by any means, but it's not something to ignore either, especially when we note how compelling these Love's charging locations can be. Anyway, again, this went long, but I think it's kind of impossible to do a deep dive without going a bit long. And then, of course, with the I apologize again for the microphone issues. The dead cat died on the trip, and I didn't have my backup with me. And then again with these, let me know what you think. But I'm hoping to try to do at least one of these a week. This took a lot longer to edit than I hoped, but again, it's a much longer video format, and so if I can do one a week, that's sort of my goal. And so I'll be posting up too, just to ask what network you'd want me to feature next, because the benefit of living in California is I seem to have access to most of the different public charging providers. So, as always, thank you for watching.